dwell in the shelter of the Most High, who abide in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord,
My refuge and my fortress, my God and my trust.
For the Lord will deliver you from the snare of the fowler, and from the deadly pestilence, and will cover you with his pinions.
Under the Lord's wings you shall find refuge. God's faithfulness is the shield and buckler.
You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day.
Nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday.
Because they cleave to me in love, I will deliver them.
I will protect them because they know my name.
When they call to me, I will answer them. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue them and honor them.
I will satisfy them with long life and show them my salvation.
homeless coalition for this county, and there is a family of
so they're looking into that. Being praying for Beth. Sorry to hear that. Yes.
I'm new here, but
Welcome. You're welcome. We're glad to have you.
thank you. But I would like for you to pray for my son. He's in a bad place right now,
Okay.
and I just really would appreciate all the prayers I can get.
Okay, certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'll add one for myself. Oh, I'm very sorry.
Dave donated a kidney in July for a friend of his, but the friend did not get Dave's kidney. But his friend Bob did finally get a kidney on Tuesday and is doing well. He's still in the hospital, but he is doing much better. And hopefully it will continue to get better and he can get on with his life.
Okay, so they do a kidney swap
Yeah,
for a bunch of people,
yes.
and the circle is going full circle, and
Yeah.
it sounds like you're going well. So
Yeah.
thank you, Dave, and everybody who's involved in that. Like I said, prayer request for myself this morning. That's exactly how I feel right now. I got up this morning, and apparently we had the dishwasher running overnight, and the drain decided to stop running and ran water all over the kitchen floor. And when we got that cleaned up, I told Susan, I'm going to have to go out for a run because I need to burn something off. Came back, and it turns out about 4 years ago, I hung a dresser in our closet, and it decided to fall off. And I had to take the whole thing apart because the frame was bending. So I would just like to say, Satan, if you're listening, the angrier you make me, the better the sermon's going to be. So all right. My morning has not gone well, and I'm counting headaches, so we're gonna venture through this. But I do have something for you this morning, and I'm glad all of you are here. So let's Pastor Tim, here saying, and we're gonna bow our heads and let us pray. Almighty God, as you heard here this morning, certainly life has a tendency of taking a few bumps along the way. We're very grateful that you have gathered us here together, no matter how many bumps we came through to make it here this morning. We ask God that you will watch over us and bless us as we are trying to journey life's way. But God, we're also grateful to know that you are a God who comes along the side of us. The scripture passage we're going to read here in just a second is certainly a testimony to that, and we are exceedingly grateful. Ask your blessing upon all the situations you heard about here this morning, people who are recovering from illness and injury, families looking for homes, young people who are lost, certainly pray for them as well, and people who are coming back from surgery. We just pray, Lord, you'll watch over all these situations. Allow these people to get to know you in a very special way as they are taking this journey called life. We thank you that we have a foundation of faith upon which we can stand. And we ask, Lord, that you will watch over us and bless us as we are trying to determine the course that you have set before us. We ask, Lord, that you'll bless the scripture passage that we're going to read here this morning. I know I say this about every week, but it's certainly one of my favorite stories, and I'm very excited to spend a little time with you here today. We ask, God, that you will open this account to us, that we can realize the lesson that's being taught here is a lesson that still applies to our lives today, and we pray, God, that you will allow us to go forward from this place to live out the example that is set. Thank you for your presence here with us, Lord, and pray your blessing upon us as we participate in this worship service together. Father, we ask all of these things in the name of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, as we join our voices together and pray the prayer that you taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. All right, our scripture lesson this morning is going to come to us from the Gospel according to John, chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning, he was back at the temple. The crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. While Moses says, we stone her, what do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. And then he stooped down and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Here is the reading. How could you not love this passage? Of all the stories we have in the Bible about Jesus, this has got to be the one place where Jesus looks the coolest. I mean, doesn't he? I mean, sure, the resurrection was kind of a boss move, no doubt, but this is a place where Jesus shows that because he's the Son of God, he actually has ice in his veins. There's a bunch of challengers come bring a specific challenge to Jesus, and now there is a woman's life hanging in the balance. They are ready to kill this woman. And what does Jesus do? He kneels down and draws something on the ground. Jesus is such a boss in the situation here that we don't even know what he drew. We're not even told. Now, there are a lot of guesses as to exactly what it was he was putting on the ground. We just don't know. And y'all know the rules. When the Bible doesn't say specifically what a detail is, Pastor Tim is allowed to guess what it is. Okay? So, after this challenge is over, okay, and all the people leave and the woman's standing there, I imagine Jesus going back to the disciples be like, what is that? And Jesus is like, oh, yeah, that. I call that the Batman. And one day he is going to be super cool, right? Now, doesn't say what he drew, so you can't say I'm wrong. So I'm just saying. But one thing about this story that I'm sure you all noticed right off the bat is as much as the first generation loved this story enough to preserve it until it made it into the Bible, this is a story that modern day doesn't like at all. And you want to know why present day hates the story? Present day, modern day, hates this particular story of Jesus, and I mean, it hates almost all the stories of Jesus, but it particularly hates this one. Because Jesus acts like a man in this passage. A real man. I don't mean a real person. I mean he did something that men should do. Boys cannot do what Jesus does here. This is Jesus being a real man, something our world does not have enough of today. Now, I wish this story would have gone differently. Okay? Honestly. And I would love for this to kind of be an action movie sort of thing where Jesus says to the disciples, or the guys come up there and like, well, should we kill her or not? And Jesus turns to the disciples and he goes, hey guys, remember that thing about me being the Son of God, which means I know everything? Let me show you this cool thing I know called Kung Fu, right? He starts beating up all these guys. I wish that's how it went. That he took on the challenge that way. But that's not how he did it. This is not fiction. This is real. And in the real world, this is how men deal with things. See, when that woman is thrown on the ground, she's there being used as a prop. And Jesus isn't goofing around. More importantly, he doesn't turn and walk away. In fact, he never even takes a step back from these guys. He is not intimidated by them. And while he was not afraid of them in any way, there was somebody there that day who was very much afraid and needed his help. And Jesus was not about to leave her there with these other guys. So we're told, Jesus starts writing something in the dirt. And sure, look, we all have curiosity. I mean, people for thousands of years have been trying to guess what they thought he was writing. There's a lot of theories out there. I even made a joke he was drawing Batman on the ground. But just for a minute, forget all of that. What he was actually drawing or writing on the ground, whatever that was, is actually irrelevant. What we need to realize, and we know this part for sure, is where was he writing it? John may not have said what it was, but he was very specific about where it was. It was on the ground. Interesting. Because who else was on the ground? She am convinced that he knelt on the ground, not because he had, some artistic inspiration, wanted to draw something. I don't think that's what it was. I honestly think he knelt so he could be next to her. You know what image I really like here? What if Jesus drew a tic-tac-toe board on the ground and they started playing together? Jesus is like, you're circle and I'm X and all this stuff. Again, we don't know what it was right, and so you can't say I'm wrong. But Jesus knelt on the ground to give two specific messages, and he gave them loud and clear, even though we don't know what he wrote on the ground. The first message he knelt to say is, lady, I care about you. That was the first message. The second message he knelt on the ground to say, to all the rest of you all, I don't care about you. You are irrelevant. So much so, I'm going to blatantly ignore you. That's why he knelt. Because keep in mind, this is actually not his problem. This is not his fight. He has no connection to the woman on the ground at all. She doesn't even get a name in this story. But Jesus is not walking away from this. And keep in mind, the crowd wants to kill her. They have bloodlust. We're going to deal with this. They want to kill this woman, and Jesus is now very literally standing in the way. That is a courageous thing to do, to stand up to a crowd to make a stand for what is right. Men, are you listening? When the world is telling you what you have to believe, it takes courage to say, no. This group in the crowd that wanted to kill this woman by stoning, what that means is they wanted to throw rocks at her until she is dead. That's what stoning means. Jesus does not even agree that the crowd seems to have made up its mind. I mean, the crowd's mind is made up. She got to go. Jesus is like, I'm not so sure. It takes guts to say something like that, to stand up to an angry mob of people, and then we need to be willing to do that. All of the women in society, not the least of which includes our wives and our daughters, need men who are willing to stand up to crowds of people who are saying stupid things. The response has to come from men, because that's our responsibility. If it's wrong, we men have to be the one to declare it so. And please pay attention, because this is extremely important, to how Jesus does this. Okay? The crowd is obviously chaotic. They're shouting, and they want violence and death and mayhem. That's what they want. Jesus never imagines their intensity. He's not screaming back at them, this angry crowd. In fact, he's being very respectful to them. I mean, you heard me read the story. He even says, you know what? You're right. Go ahead. And whoever does not deserve to be the next person stoned to death, you go first. Right? Jesus said, look, I get it. You guys are holding a standard, a very important standard from the law of Moses. So Jesus respectfully assumes that this standard that you are so bent out of shape about, if it is so important to you that you're going to kill this woman to defend it, then it must be true that all you boys in the crowd must be keeping your house in order. You have nothing out of order. Nothing you can be accused of. Obviously, you must be perfect. You can stand up to scrutiny. So if you want to cancel this woman's life, then go ahead. Because, of course, your life has nothing in it that would require stoning. To me, that's why Jesus is kneeling. Because if one of these jerks in the crowd decides he's going to throw a rock, it ain't just going to hit her. It's going to hit him too. Jesus was willing to put his money where his mouth was. And you can almost feel the tension of the story where the disciples would be like, Jesus, you might want to move over there. Over there might be better for you. Because that's what Jesus says. Very specifically. He's going to say it with righteousness, and he's going to say it with integrity. And because he had that, he can say whatever he wants. He said, fine, you guys should kill him, because that's what the law says. Whoever is above reproach, go first. Be a man of integrity, you guys. That's what he's saying to them. And since you obviously are, go for it. That's what Jesus says. Now, in this scenario, let's consider this woman for a second. Who is she? And again, I have no idea who she is. I can guess, I can speculate, that's all it would be. But there are some things about this woman that I think we can be pretty sure about. First, of all the people there in the crowd, the angry crowd, the people gathered around, obviously, she is not a wife to any of those people. She is not a sister to any of those people. She is not a daughter to any of these men there. All of the men in her life who should have taken better care of her than this were not present. So either she didn't have any of those relationships, or the people who were fulfilling those roles in her life were not taking their responsibility very seriously. She had no one. No one willing to stand up, to stand beside her. She was alone. And that's why this group of very weak men were pulling this stunt in the first place. They weren't going to try to take the wife of somebody important or somebody big, because in that scenario, they would have to worry about a very angry man coming along and saying, guess what ain't happening today, guys? And guess how much you're going to bleed for me to prove that? They didn't want to deal with that, so they picked somebody who didn't have that. Had nobody willing to make that stand. So Jesus says, you don't got anybody to stand up for you? Guess what? I will. And I will stand up by kneeling on a statement. But look what happens after this crowd of loudmouths left. Okay? They all decided, I don't know that I want this bunch of idiots looking into my life that close, so they drop their rocks on the ground and leave. And after it's all done and Jesus is doing his art project or whatever he's doing on the ground, I absolutely love how he speaks to her. Jesus, who again was on the ground with her. When I was working on the sermon, I love the image of them playing tic-tac-toe together. Isn't that great? That would just be great. But I find Jesus saying after she wins the third consecutive game, he wipes it off the ground and says, wow! So nobody decided to condemn you, huh? I mean, that should have been obvious, considering there were no rocks flying around. I mean, you'd think he would have noticed. But what Jesus was doing by saying this was he gave her the ability to speak by speaking to her in the kindest possible way. Nobody condemned you? Well, I guess I don't either. Okay, and it's at this moment where men run into incredible trouble today. And since marriage is not as common as it used to be, and the institution of marriage doesn't appear to work like it ought to anymore, we get the idea that society at large, not necessarily us, but society at large, they're no longer looking for spouses. And I can tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. Every woman wants a man who will be willing to do what Jesus does here. Think about what he did. He took a risk, he made a stand, and as popular as this may be in this current era of girl bosses and women who take care of themselves, Jesus went out on a limb and did for her what she could not do for herself. Now, all too often, after something like that happens, the man in this situation looks at the woman and immediately wants her to act like his wife, because now she owes him something. I mean, look, she was already caught, apparently, in the act of adultery, so maybe she can pay Jesus back for saving the day. What a terrible thing for me to say, is it not? I shouldn't talk that way about Jesus, or suggest such things about Jesus. And you're right. I shouldn't suggest things like that. But how often does it happen? You see, in our modern times, women are so starved for men to act like men and do men things that even the hint or suggestion that some guy might be willing to stand up as a man, she wants to act like his wife, even though she's not. Jesus is not going to take advantage of her. She's obviously very vulnerable. She was at risk because a bunch of little boys in the crowd were being tough. Jesus ran them off because he embarrassed them. But he's not going to turn around and make this woman his girlfriend. What Jesus did here for this woman, he did because it was the right thing to do. And he did it for no other reason. He was not in it for himself. When this bunch of loudmouths started grandstanding and challenging Jesus, Jesus decided, to no one's surprise, that in this situation that was completely out of control, Jesus was going to be the boss. No conversation, no debate, no whining. Jesus was going to determine what was going to happen. And what he determined was that this woman was going to live. to accomplish that goal, Jesus took control of an out-of-control situation just like a man does. Now I know, none of us are surprised in any way that Jesus was not going to take advantage of this woman, clearly. But back me up here, guys. The temptation to do that in this moment would be great. Jesus said, listen, this is exactly what he said. He says, no one here condemned you. I'm not going to either. Think about what that meant. How many men in her life had condemned her? That's probably what she was expecting to happen here, because in her life, it was likely the only thing that got rid of the current bully was a bigger bully. Jesus says, not anymore. Go home. Go home by yourself. No scoundrels are going to follow you home because I scared them off. Far too often, I actually feel sorry for how so many women are treated today. It's because our culture is creating a generation of men who have no idea what it means to be one in a lot of different ways. And because there are so few men willing to take charge of situations where little boys in men's bodies are making decisions, they're deciding what's going to happen, not mature, grown-up people, and no one's willing to challenge that, it makes things get chaotic or run out of control. Most of the men would come upon a situation like this, and they would see the woman on the ground, see the chaos around her. So many men would walk on by, said nothing, or decided, this is not my problem, and walked away. Man, we've got to stop doing that. When we see something that's not right, we have to say something. Quit caring what the rage mob out there thinks. When you see something that's wrong, call it that. Say this is wrong. That's what Jesus did here. He did it by kneeling on the ground next to a woman that everybody hated. Guys, we're going to have to take some risks. And some people are not going to like it. But this world, and particularly the women that we men love the most, they need men who are willing to say, nope, not today. You don't need to be a jerk about it. I mean, whatever way you want to describe Jesus here, what Jesus does in this passage, however you want to describe it, you can't accuse him of being rude. He made a clear stand to say killing this woman was wrong, even though the law of the Old Testament said they were in the right. These men were clearly abusing the scriptures to make a point and trap Jesus. And I'm sure that once Jesus ran these guys off, you know what they did. They ran directly back to the temple and said, y'all know what Jesus said? He said, we don't have to follow the law of Moses anymore. And Jesus said no such thing. They went back and lied about him. You know they did. Because that's what weak people do. They lie about strong people. Man, we have got to get over the idea that everyone has to like us. And I can tell you, if you have a teenage daughter living at your house and she likes you all the time, you're doing something wrong. Alright? Men, if we aren't out there making the right people angry at us, then what are we doing? There are people in our world, I don't need to describe this to you. Go watch the news. There are people out there with evil intention. And if we can't make evil people hate us, it's because they don't view us as a threat. And let me give you a spectacular example of this. There's a movie out right now that was recommended to me by my good friend Aaron Powell. And the movie is called Nefarious. You may have heard of it. I'm putting that out there. If you want to watch it, go ahead. If you want to watch a movie that will make you passionately hate Satan, watch that one. It's the best one I've ever seen to do that. But in this movie, there's a man who's possessed by a demon. The demon's name is Nefarious, and this man is on death row. And at one point, a priest comes in. And when the priest walks in, Nefarious, the demon, jumps away from him, jumps back. But then the demon stands there a minute, and he listens to what the priest has to say. And he realizes the priest has no spine at all. The guy's a weakling. And immediately, upon noticing that, Nefarious wants to make friends with the priest, who actually the priest is the one who's afraid of him. That's how evil looks at a man who wants to be liked. The priest in this movie, he just wants to be all smart and academic and all this stuff. And in doing so, the demon actually liked him, friends. That's a bad sign. That priest is so ineffective that that evil did not even fear him at all, actually liked the guy because he was no threat at all. Men, does evil in this world think that you're a threat? I hope so. Because there are people in this world who want to prey, P-R-E-Y, prey on your children. They want to mislead your wife. Are you a threat to those kind of influences? This is what Jesus was to the man in the crowd. He was a threat, but he was a threat for two reasons. It's because Jesus was righteous and Jesus was fearless. He didn't care what they thought. He didn't care what they said about him. He didn't even care what they did because she was there and he was next to her. Why? Because their opinions didn't matter to him in the least. Because all they wanted to do was hurt this woman to make a point, and Jesus made fun of them for it. If the evil in this world does not believe that you're capable of that, then you're not a man. I'm sorry. You can be nice, you can get along, you can be cooperative, you can even be helpful. And all those things are good, and I'm not getting into that. But if you lack enough spine to make evil hate you like Jesus does in this passage, you fall short of the mark. You see, Jesus, he wanted their hatred. He wanted them to not like him. He wanted that. That's why he's there. Saving this poor woman's life was icing on the cake. Men, we cannot fear. Because fear leads to compromise. And compromise leads to people like this woman from John chapter 8 getting hurt. Because no one is willing to call the garbage what it is, like Jesus did in this passage. Man, we fall short of this mark because we're afraid. It is, honestly, it's so much easier to just get along. Jesus could have done that in this scenario. He could have gone along with the crowd, saved himself a lot of trouble. I mean, that woman would be dead, but at least everybody would like him. Because you know, women and children are the ones who pay when men are afraid to be men. The answer to fear is righteous action. There's no substitute. This woman in this passage, she got to live. She got to go home to her child. Remember, she was caught in the act of adultery. That's what that means. She has a child, she's not married. This woman got to live that day and go home to that child. Why? Because Jesus refused to compromise. It wasn't even an option. No way he was going to do that. And look, I get it. You're not Jesus. True. But there are certain ways we can be like him. And guys, men, there are women and children in your life who are counting on you to be like this. So in closing here this morning, I'll say, you can't walk on water. True. I mean, you can't heal sickness and illness with your hands like Jesus did. True. You can't command the weather with your voice. Also true. You can't feed 5,000 people with one person's lunch. All that's true. But there is one way you can be like Jesus. You can go out and make evil hate you. That's what you can do. And when evil hates you, friends, wear that hatred with pride. Because what that means is you have gone forward and made a stand and you have earned it. So that's my challenge to you here today. Earn the world's hatred of evil because of your righteousness. Go forward and make a stand. Call things wrong that are wrong. Stand up for the people in your life. Tell people, that's not going to happen here. Because when we make those kind of stands, yeah, the world doesn't like it. But the innocent people who get hurt by this stuff end up protected. So in that way, go forward from this place and be like Jesus. And I encourage you to do this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
I did not put it together until I was standing over there listening to Beth sing this final song. You know what happens when you make a stand against evil? Satan clogs up your sink and runs your dishwasher all over the floor. And he tears your dresser off the wall. It's been there for 5 years. That's what happens. So, I honestly can't put that together. I'm a little slowly up here. Friends, that's the kind of stuff's going to happen. And you know what we do? We laugh at it and we move on because making a stand for what's right is totally worth it. Go forward and make that stand in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks everybody. I hope you can hear okay. I see 9 of you are on. Appreciate it. Leave a like on this video and next week.